My name's Adela and I make minis. Back in April, I challenged myself to make
100 vases in 100 days.
I didn't really have a plan or vision when I started this one, which is a technique that only sometimes works out for me. And I must admit, I spent most of today thinking my non-plan would backfire. I'd just reclaimed this clay, which meant it was on the softer side, which is not the greatest when you want to pinch out nice thin walls. I also wasn't really sure what was going on with the shape. After some finagling, I ended up with something quite square and cube-like. At this point, I was pretty stumped as to what to do for the neck, and for once, sketching didn't provide much inspiration. In the end, I decided something small and discreet might be the best solution, so I added a little sausage of clay and blended it in. And you know what? It actually looks really nice. Despite the lovely neck sausage, I was kind of tempted to squish this one and start again. It was a bit of a weird one, but I thought it would be better to channel my destructive energy into something else. Slicing. If this one's going to be square, it's going to be really square. I gave it a quick blast with the hairdryer to firm up the clay and got to work shaping the body with my metal rib. I did, at one point, live out my greatest fears and rip a hole into the side, but it ended up being a super easy fix and a nice little history for this piece. I can't wait to see this one glazed and finished. I loved Day 70's vase so much that I really wanted to carry on playing with layers today. I had the image of a pot covered in scales. So I made the body and added the same chunky lip as yesterday. Then I got to cutting out some small scales with my wooden tool as a template. I mocked up the scales on the piece and quickly realised that this wasn't going to work for me. The scales were just way too big. I tried making some turbo scales from a tiny clay coil, but these were too thick and awkward to apply. My final attempt was to add some flat little chunks all over the body to create an uneven, cracked earth type effect, but that just looked really naff. I smoothed everything out and began to appreciate just how nice and rounded this piece actually was. So in the spirit of round and chunky, I gave him some lovely big handles and suddenly the piece started coming to life. I had Day 64 winking at me from my shelf, so I caved and gave this one a little face too. It was a bit of a struggle to get to this point, but he ended up a little cutie. After my not so fabulous luck being spontaneous this week, I started today off with a sketch and decided on this little shape. Nice and rounded, with the guest star of this week, a chunky lip. Once I got a rough shape for the body, I began slowly refining it with my metal rib and wooden tool. A good trick that I've learned is to turn the piece upside down every so often. It can give you a better idea of where the wonk is, as you're seeing the piece from a different and fresh perspective. It's especially handy when I'm attaching handles, as it can help make them more symmetrical. I was quite pleased with this one. It ended up looking really close to my sketch, wonk included, but it did feel a little bit unfinished. So I gave him a face. I absolutely adore how grumpy this one is. And if you love him too, don't worry, because he will be available through my website as soon as he's been glazed. My quest for petals and layers was still incomplete, so today I decided to give it another go. I wasn't totally happy with how the petals themselves came out last time, and I wanted to see if I could make them even more tapered and delicate, like a real petal. Last time I tried all sorts of techniques to try and shape the clay, from pinching to rolling, but I think potentially the most effective way was using a wet paintbrush. There's something about using a delicate tool to make a delicate thing that just feels right. So after the body was done, I got to work slowly and meditatively painting my petals. It took a little longer to shape the clay than I thought it would, but it was well worth it. Next time I might try a slightly stiffer brush, which might speed things up and give me a bit more of an extreme effect. But even so, I think this one is a real winner. I just really hope that it manages to survive the kiln and the house move. Day 75 was an exciting day. I wanted to make an Amphora-like shape today, inspired by this guy who sits and smiles at me every single day from his shelf. But rather than pinch the shape out, I thought, let's go a bit rogue and slab build it. To start the process, I sketched out the shape of the body at roughly the size I wanted the final piece to be. I then cut that out and used it as a template to draw out an angular version of the shape with the top and bottom separate. I used these angular shapes to begin drafting out the nets for 2 truncated cones. Mainly, they're there as a guide for my compass. The flat lines don't really matter, it's the corners I need. And after all that maths, this is what you come out with. It's then just a case of cutting these pieces out of the clay, completing each shape, adding a slab for the base, and joining the 2 halves together. Once the top piece was on, I then moved on to refining the shape before adding a nice rounded lip and some funky little handles. I finished it off with a tiny little medallion, and I have to say, this one might be one of my favourites. It's got a totally different feel to my other minis thanks to how it was made. Slab built pieces tend to be more uniform, and it was such a nice change to the way I usually work. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Today I decided that I wanted to shake things up and combine my slab building with my slicing from the start of the week. I made the slabs a little bit thicker today to give myself some more leeway when it came to the carving. Spoiler alert, I still managed to gouge out a hole through the side, but oh well. This one didn't end up quite as rugged as the one from earlier this week, which was a little disappointing. My current theory is that the clay was still a bit too wet when I was carving, meaning I couldn't be too bold with my cuts in case I squished the piece. I still really like the movement and texture on this piece though, and it's super interesting to see how the 2 ancient styles of Greece and Japan work together. I wanted to end the week with something a little more loosey-goosey. My plan was to create a vase around whatever spontaneous shape might come out today. And it turned out a lot like day 73, and it kind of made me realise that this week has been a little bit repetitive, where I've just been revolving around the same few ideas and combining my favourites. In some ways, I see it as a good thing and a natural outcome of doing something like this for so long. When you start out, there's more focus on training your hands to translate your ideas. Once you're decent at that, it becomes more about discovering what you like, what works, what doesn't work, and why. And now it feels like I'm zoning in on something and moving on to the next stage where you're refining and going deeper. And there are shapes that I always return to because I know that they're more stable or more practical. And then there are just things that I like visually. That's not to say I'm done experimenting by any stretch of the imagination. This week has just been more about depth instead of breadth, I guess. And that was week 11. A little bit delayed thanks to my horrible cold, but a really fun one too. There are only 23 minis left to go, and I really hope you'll join me for those. Thank you so much for watching, and please do subscribe if you're enjoying these so that you don't miss next week.